guys, and welcome back to another video. So today's intro is going to be a little bit strange. I actually had this footage ready for more of an ASMR type of video, or like a keep me company, or just like a full kind of like longer formed video. But I did not notice that my nose was very like whistly, I guess, when I was breathing, so it just made everything a little bit unbearable for me to edit, let alone for you guys to watch. So I decided to just put music over it. I'll leave some of the real-time sounds in here just because there are some, I don't know, maybe it makes a nice feeling to the video instead. But we are going to be doing voiceover for the rest of this video so that it's more bearable to watch to some degree. But let's talk about what we are going to be doing today. As you can see, I have a sketch done already on kind of like Bristol Vellum. So this is about, I think it's an 11 by 14 paper pad. So I'm using this because I wanted to do some inking today alongside with using a little bit of alcohol marker. And this paper I love using alcohol markers with. So the sketch is already done with the Pilot Color Eno and the color red. For the line art, I am using the fine liners drawing pens from Ohuhu, and I'm going to select 3 pens a little bit later. Alongside with that, I wanted to add some flat blacks and just some texture and stuff here and there, so I'm going to be using the calligraphy pens that you've seen from previous videos as well. These will help with kind of like filling in a lot of my darks or any areas that need a little bit more of like those flat blacks anyways. But last but not least, I wanted to do a little bit of like gray tones here and there to add a little bit more value to everything. So I decided to pull out 2 neutral grays. So these are the Ohuhu markers, and I have 2 neutral grays. I think one's 03 and one's just number 3. So I'll use those to kind of add a little bit of like mid-tone and extra shading here and there where I think I couldn't really add with just the inking. So for the fine liners, I chose 3 of them, which is the 0.2, the 0.5, and the 1.0. And I'm also grabbing a sheet from my sketchbook. So I like to keep a page under my hand so that we can prevent any moisture from getting on the page, because my hands do get clammy from time to time, alongside with the fact that I won't be smudging any of my lines, hopefully, either my sketch or the ink on the paper. Also, I do appreciate that you guys liked the previous video where I did a little bit of like inking of a small mini comic in my sketchbook, but I still want to do a lot more inking and just practice regardless. So I wanted to do a session where we could focus a little bit more on just like purely inking and a little bit more of like monochromatic-ish looks, so that in the future when I want to do some more sessions in my sketchbook, hopefully I have a better idea of how I want to do the inking, or if like I have a preference of, you know, certain things. So like eye styles, or just like the hatching, if I want to do like flat blacks or all that, or just like more texture via hatching and cross hatching and all that. So in terms of who I'm drawing today, it probably won't be as evident unless you can read my text from my very faded sketch. So I am drawing Reimu Endo from Niji-san Gen. I thought it'd be cute to do almost like a sketch page-esque format, but traditionally, and just like keep it very themed and all in one style. So today we are going to be doing, like I mentioned, the inking. You can hear my nose be whistling, which is like gonna drive me insane. I think it might be cute to do one for all of my Oshis that I have, so I might do one for Ike, and I might do one for Alban, and then maybe one for Kaida Haru from JP's side, and maybe some other characters if you guys wish to see more of this kind of format for maybe Genshin characters, Honkai Star Rail, Ensemble Stars. Actually, we'll kind of get back to that, but let me talk a little bit more about this particular kind of drawing or page. So the main problem that I had with doing this inking session is that, one, I changed my setup a little bit for this one to make myself a little bit more comfortable, but I think I have to change back to my previous setup because I think the lighting and just like the camera angle was just not really working for what I wanted. So hopefully this will be the last of just me fiddling around with this particular setup, and we'll go back to the other one, which I think fits a little bit better or works a little bit better in terms of like getting something a little bit more consistent for the traditional art, because I would love to do more like inking sessions. Obviously, I still like doing a lot of the long form traditional drawing, so like alcohol markers, I've done colored pencils, I've done graphite and all that. And I want to include inking into the mix, but I need to see if I can fiddle with my mic settings so that you guys can actually hear the inking, because mostly what you're going to hear is me brushing my hand across the paper, and occasionally when I pull out like the brush pens, you'll probably hear a little bit more. Or maybe I'll whip out the dip pen. We'll see. We'll see how comfortable I can get, but it would be nice to do another like longer silent session so that people can put it into the background so you don't have to hear me ramble too much, and you can kind of have it at your own pace instead of this cut up footage, because I won't do a voiceover for 2 hours of footage anyways. So before I get too sidetracked, in terms of the layout, I have like Reimu's main outfit and her like, I guess her debut outfit, her first form, as kind of like the main drawing at the very center near the bottom, which is the one I'm going to be focusing my energy mostly on because it's so close to the front and it's like the thing that's probably going to catch your attention first. And then above that, I do have her name kind of like in the center around her little ghostly ring. And then above that, I have 3 more drawings. So if you were able to see from my brief glimpse at the sketch that I did, I have her other outfits. So from kind of like left to right, we have her outfit that she had for Zutomo, which is like alongside with Anna, Millie, and Petra. And then we have the one in the center, which I believe is her second outfit. And I don't remember if this is for the second anniversary or for the first anniversary. Then after that, we have the most recent outfit, her 4th outfit, which is kind of like casual sleepwear, which I find very cute. And I thought it'd be nice to kind of like include all of them into the kind of like sketch page-esque format. Now, in the future, I might open it up more to like less of a obvious presentation of everything, if that makes sense. So usually when I do like sketch pages digitally or where they first originated in my sketchbook, I would actually kind of like start in one area and try my best to fill up the space as much as I can. But for this one, because I wanted to give enough kind of like attention to the very main one and then kind of like equal attention to the rest of the 3 on the very top, it's very formatted in like a way that's like very predictable and very clean. But in the future, when I do more sessions like this, I might add color to those sessions too. I think it could be nice to do like a full page of just markers or something like that. I would like to be a little bit more sporadic or like actually me trying to fill out the space. So I won't focus too much on being like, oh, I want like specific outfits or whatever. I might just like fiddle around, sketch what I want, and then we can go in and try to interpret maybe the inking. Another fun thing about doing something like this, besides getting like a lot of practice for inking, I do think it would be kind of fun to lean in towards making actual like another finished comic strip page or something of that sort on this paper on a larger scale, so that I can really put in a lot of the details that I kind of want. Even though I can do it in my sketchbook, I want to get more confident, probably like inking something more tedious or something that requires like so much detail, so that I actually learn more about the inking rather than inking the same things that I tend to do. So hopefully I'll get to that point, and I would like to do it on this paper because this kind of like vellum surface I think works super well with one, absorbing a lot of the ink. I don't really have to worry about bleed through either. The only thing I had to really watch out for is that on Reimu's, actually I don't really see it that much on the screen right now, is that when I was working on her, I guess her hand that's on the very left side of the page, like the one that I'm currently working on, I did end up smudging it at some point because this paper does absorb the ink nicely because it is of like a thicker paper type. It does take a little bit longer for it to dry if I oversaturate it, but it doesn't have really any bleed through and all that, so it's just nice to work on. But I do have to be mindful that if I do pull up the ink in one area, it is going to take a while for it to dry, so I shouldn't put my hand into the ink right away, which I accidentally end up doing. But luckily it was in a place that I was able to cover up with like more of a flat black, or to kind of cover it up with some of the hatching here. I mentioned also in like a previous video that I would like to do more of like a master study or something of inking. So back when I was in university, one of the very first projects that we had to do, or not projects, assignments, I guess, that we had to do was to pick I think it was like some sort of etching of a master drawer, painter, anybody basically. That had to be an etching though, so that you could see any cross hatching and like hatching in general that they do for their drawings. Because hatching in kind of like etching is kind of like the only way you can really add like texture, line, build up your form in that way. Just because you're using like the pressure of the tool on top of like a hard surface, there's not really a way for you to like slowly build it up in a way. It's kind of like just black and white, if that makes sense. So we had to do a master study of that, but using pencil. So like we had to do a lot of figuring out how we wanted to interpret the hatching and just do like a one-to-one master study. So I think it would be fun if I can, and hopefully it won't be too daunting of a task, but we'll see. But what I want to do is to do kind of like a master study of one of the panels or drawings or something from Witch Hat Atelier, because the inking in that is so pretty. Or yeah, I could also just do like a bunch of different studies of like very small panels or like of characters and stuff of people that have done like mangaka, more like that towards that kind of inking style, if that makes sense, so that I can get a good idea of how people tend to do maybe like hatching, or just like to try to achieve that look with the materials that I have. Because I know some of them are done purely with like screen tone, some are done with just like dip pen ink. So I will probably do a lot of experimenting, because it is kind of like one of the goals that I want to do more practice to get confident in inking and all that, so that I can do some traditional work that might involve, I guess, like being a print or something for future. There's like a project I would like to do, but it's not exactly like a comic per se, but it might be related to it in some sort of way. But I won't get into that until like we actually get to the project, because I don't even know if this will be something I can put into fruition, but we'll see. So in terms of what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the video, so I tried my best to put the majority of the actual inking process into real time, and then the rest of it will be in time lapse. Now there is going to be some exceptions here, and hopefully the sounds won't be too messy here and there, but I would like to do more longer videos that show the entire inking. I know a lot of you guys find inking or like line art very therapeutic. It's like low-key hard for me to enjoy doing the inking process sometimes. But if I know people are interested in it, I will definitely try to take my time to do a good job of it. But also I just want to do it because I want to get more comfortable with just like line work and all that jazz. So I hope you guys don't mind that, you know, in the upcoming months, or like maybe just the entirety of next year, there will be a lot more of me just working both digitally and traditionally, trying to learn how to do like more inking, getting used to hatching, adding values and that stuff. Because I did mention in that comic making video where I did stuff in my sketchbook is that eventually I would like to find a comfortable style for making like mini comics of my OCs. And I do like the fact that people were giving me suggestions of a few other kind of like comics, web comics and all that stuff that doesn't have a very specific story, or like it's not 100% like story driven, and it's more like daily updates or like daily life stuff that revolves around my OCs, but doesn't have to have like a like super coherent driving plot. Hopefully that makes sense. So basically it'll be like situation based, and they can just be short. And I remember watching a video actually super recently by an artist I really like named Kesh. I'll put their stuff in the description if I remember that I talked about this person. But they actually had a video recently talking about making comics and their recommendations on making what they would consider kind of like a mini comic or like a short comic. So it had like a certain amount of pages, how he goes about writing the dialogue, how he plans out the frames and all that stuff. So it would be nice to do something similar where I can work on a shorter project and just really focus on trying to make it the way that I want it to look, and to kind of portray my characters the way I want them to be as well. So maybe I'll give myself like a small goal in kind of like 2025. I would like to make some sort of mini comic that's longer, obviously, than like the 2 pages in my sketchbook. Like one that has a little bit more substance, because the one in my sketchbook, I think I talked about this. I kind of skipped the beginning portion of where the bear idea kind of got introduced, or why they're at like the crane game, I guess. And then I didn't really show the aftermath per se, in terms of like them giving Kaisen the bear what kind of happens to the bear after Kaisen receives it and all that. So like I would like it to be a little bit more concise in terms of the entire quote unquote plot of like the mini comic. And I do have like another one planned in my head for, I'm trying to think who's in this scenario. I think it's Masaki, Koji, and Kaisen again. Because I have another cute one that I would like to do for those three. But I might do it digitally so that we can kind of do it back and forth between doing traditional inking or doing like an actual digital version of either doing black and white, or if I want to go more webtoon style and do something like simple with like colors, or like maybe I want to do a specific color palette or something. I'm going to play around with a lot of things hopefully next year so that I can do more with my OCs. They're kind of stuck in this weird place, I think, where low-key like they're in OC jail, where I make them and then nothing happens to them, and that's about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of people create characters because they enjoy the process, so you have like hundreds and hundreds of OCs. But for me, usually when I create an OC that's like I want to draw them more, they technically do become more of like part of Masaki's world. So I would like to have situations and like little comics about their interactions and stuff so that they seem more like actual characters rather than just like a visual representation of some dude on a page. But enough rambling about that. So for the inking process for Reimu, I ended up doing a lot more black on her first outfit and her second outfit, which is the one in the middle. And then I think this one has very little, and then the one on the very left also has very little, which is kind of why I wanted to add a little bit of like mid-tone or like grays to kind of fill out those other forms. Now, if I was a little bit more confident with placement of like lighting so that I knew where exactly my shadows were, I technically could just do hatching and just hope for the best. But I always fear that if I were to do a lot more inking, I might lose a lot of contrast because I end up overworking it. So this is kind of like one of the things I want to work on, is that I don't want to over render something to the point where I can't fix it. And this is obviously going to be a problem more so with traditional art rather than digital, because digital you can always paint or like put new layers and place your lighter colors back in. But like when you're doing traditional art, I do have to be a little bit wary of where I'm placing my highlights, or if I do end up kind of screwing something up, do I want to white it out? Do I want to use acrylic paint to fix it? Or do I just leave it and try to darken everything else to try to make something else stand out and try to not really lose that contrast? But if you guys have any manga recommendations for me to kind of maybe do a study of in the future, do let me know. I definitely want to look into some shoujo-esque type of manga again. I haven't read a lot of shoujo in like a very long time, but I always love how they do like their hair alongside with their kind of just like their eyes alongside with like effects that feel a little bit more like dreamlike, a little bit softer and stuff. And I know like other manga would have this too, but I would like to play around with it just because I would like to try them out traditionally. I feel like doing the comics and stuff that I want to do digitally, I might go the simple route so that I can add color in some sort of way, which is like a whole nother different problem I'm gonna have, because I would love to have more of an airier, softer, watercolor-esque look to them, but a part of me also wants them to be like very simple, a little bit more popping, like eye-catching in a way, but like very simple, very easy to read? Or do I want to go more like detailed with my line work, but then keep the colors super simple? So I might play around with all of those because a part of me already knows that I might not make them all black and white unless I'm working traditionally. Even though I've seen like stuff on Pinterest where I think the person works with watercolor and gouache and they do a lot of their panels just like full color and they look stunning. If I can find them, I hope kind of like saved them in my inspirations board on Pinterest, but I'll see if I can dig them up and I'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out. Because I think that kind of interesting, even though I know I'm not at that skill level at all. It'll be nice to do something like similar-ish if I can in my sketchbook in the future though. Maybe not with gouache, maybe with marker or something, or colored pencils, but it could be a fun thing to do to tackle like in the future, definitely. So back to the drawing process, I went ahead and pulled out my kneaded eraser so that we could go ahead and lighten up all of my red lines because a part of me had the thought that I should just do all of my sketch work with graphite, like with the normal gray color, but I was scared that I might go a little bit too hard and it smudges a lot easier, that I might not be able to tell what is what, but I ended up going with red anyways, even though I knew that the red sometimes is a little hard to erase if I press a little bit too hard. Now, if I really want to get rid of the red, I could just use a larger white eraser, like the rubber ones, and then just really go at it. But I also don't really want to damage the paper all too much. After that though, I wanted to add in our midtones. So I picked out two grays like I mentioned at the very beginning. They both state that they are neutral gray. And when I was comparing the markers, the one that I'm using right now, I think it's like O3. And then we have one that's just the number 3. So even though they share technically the same number, they do differ in value. So I'm using the lighter one first, and then later on we'll use the darker one to fill out some of the darker areas or to layer up a little bit. So you can see I did a little bit of a darker rim on Reimu's eyes, and I'll use it on some of the darker cloth that she has. But for the most part, I do like the look of the kind of like gray tone, and I do think like me doing the one that I did in my sketchbook gave me a very good insight into how exactly I want to do my midtones, because I do like keeping them fairly light and just have a lot of contrast if I can with the black inking or line work in this case, so that we can push the contrast as much as we can. Because like I said, I tend to overwork certain things when it comes to shading, so I don't want to accidentally end up like having to do too much like blending and all that. I would like to keep it more cell shady, but you can see that when I was using the brush tip portion of using the alcohol marker, I did do a lot of like the flicking for, I think, Reimu's fabric on her hands so that I could get a softer look for part of it, but it would have been nice if I planned out the shadows and did more of like a harsher cell shaded look, more akin to like comics, or like if you were to cut out your screen tone and not really scratch at the surface to kind of like scratch away the texture to get kind of like a softer look. I would like to do one that's a little bit more of like harsh shadows, and that's something I can experiment a little bit later when I do some other like sketch pages and stuff, and maybe we can figure out how exactly we want to do the shadows and stuff. But I'm also open to doing monochromatic looks, not with gray. So initially when I was doing the comic for Kaisen and Maseki with the bear at like the little arcade crane game, I was thinking of making it like a specific color for that comic instead. So like either make the entire thing a little bit more cooler so we could lean it towards purple, or if I wanted to lean it towards like green or something for Maseki, or even like swapping it so that, or not swapping it, assigning a color to each of them so that they could have their own I guess like specific color to them in the comic, but I feel like that would get too messy too quickly. So I feel like a monochromatic look for the traditional one would look very cute. And the other thing I was gonna think about is that maybe I could do the inking on watercolor paper, because I do have quite a bit of hot press paper, and then do some light washes that way. I might have to think about what exactly I have for like fine liners and stuff because I don't want any of the watercolor to bleed. Um, but I think it could be fun to do that too, and I could get like the washes that I want in terms of the color and try to keep everything fairly light. And I think I do have a better control at keeping my highlights and like stronger rim lighting and all that jazz when it comes to watercolor because I tend to be a little bit more slower and a little bit more mindful when it comes to that medium. But I think we're pretty much at the end in terms of doing the midtones and the shading with the alcohol markers. I do think the page turned out pretty cute, so I would like to do another one in the future. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'll do the next session with watercolors so that we can play around with that style as well. But we are at the end of today's session. Now I'll try my best to try not to get so sick every night because of the change in temperature and stuff, so that my nose keeps running. But I will do another inking session in the future where we can focus just on like a nice pure inking, no sound, no talking kind of video. But for now, hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!